So I just finished editing this video and it's well over an hour long, which is much longer than I expected it to be. But don't panic if you prefer shorter videos. There will be gameplay in the background throughout, all sorts of different stuff from across the various packs, and each run will be its own chapter, so if you need to watch in bite-sized chunks, you're good to go. Honestly, this might be a hard watch in one go because it's me talking constantly throughout, and actually recording this was a good reminder of why people don't do full tier lists anymore. Either way, this is all RevGT's fault, so please direct any complaints to him. He made a top 10 video recently and tricked me into trying to outdo him. And while I am still furious with him, you should still go and watch his video first, because I will be spoiling some of his picks as I go. And one last disclaimer, as with all top 10 lists, there will be a good deal of personal bias involved. So don't get upset if I disparage any of your favourites, or if I leave them out altogether. Alright, we're starting out with the top 10 rarities. Now, with all of these lists, I'm mostly talking about custom packs, specifically standard mode. I've only played standard since the update dropped, and I think it's probably the fairest way to evaluate a lot of units. That really only becomes relevant when we get to the very end and we actually look at the top 10 best units in the game. For this particular one, I'm really just talking about which pets do I rarely ever, if ever, see when I play Custom Packs Arena. So with all of these top 10s, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show all the pets at once except for the number 1 pick. And that means that you can maybe have a think as I'm going through the other pets and try and guess what the number 1 pick is going to be in each list. So starting out with the Salmon of Wisdom, or Salmon of Knowledge. I think originally it was called Salmon of Wisdom in the promotional material, but it ended up being changed to Salmon of Knowledge. This is a pet that you used to see more frequently when Mermal was still broken, but these days I'm not sure if I've even seen more than 1 or 2 salmon since the update came out, which rebalanced some of the level up pets. I think a lot of the pets that have abilities that affect both sides of the board are pretty uncommon, and maybe salmon is the least common of the lot. Then 9, 8 and 7, we're going to group them all together, and I should say in most of these lists the ordering doesn't really matter too much. There are so many pets that it's really splitting hairs saying whether or not something is number 8 or number 3 on a list of 10. But 9, 8 and 7, we've got coconut crab, black bear and squid. And I've kind of grouped these together because I think they're all very, very good units, and yet they are extremely uncommon in customs. Black bear and coconut crab especially are surprising because they're both free to play, and there are so many enablers for them with all the corncob pets. And yet, for every 1 black bear I see, I've probably seen 50 to 100 chimpanzees. So make of that what you will. And of course, squid is a really strong unit, especially since Cherry was changed. But again, it's something that you rarely ever see, even though it has an incredible starting stat line for a tier 2 as well. Hare is another one that I very rarely see. It's got a pretty unpredictable ability. But you would think maybe it would be a bit more common now that we've got a lot more perk gaining abilities. Axolotl is going crazy these days, so it's kind of surprising that there aren't that many hare teams out there. Then at number 5, we've got the reworked tapir. Now the old tapir was extremely common because it was a very strong pet for summon teams. Of course you could pill it in the shop as well, but most of the time you're not going to know if your opponent pilled a tapir in the previous turn. However, these days it's now a start of battle summon pet, and I think I haven't seen a single one since the last update dropped. I did see a few after the original update that changed the ability, but since then I'm really struggling to think of a single team that I have seen which managed to use the tapir to good effect. That's not to say I don't think it's a good unit, it's just for some reason people haven't warmed to it the way they did the original version. Now number 4 is Dove. This is another unit that potentially people might be pilling in the shop, but I never do it myself, and I honestly can't imagine there are many people doing it either, because it removes strawberries now. In the olden days when you pilled Dove, it would give the buffs to the strawberry units, but the strawberries would remain, so you could just rinse and repeat. But now it removes the strawberries, and it kind of makes it very expensive, unless maybe you're being very, very efficient with the pheasant ability. But in terms of teams that actually have an onboard Dove, I'm not sure I've seen a single one since the update either. Now Axe Handle Hound, I put out a video about the Axe Handle not that long ago. It was very fun to use, and yet I don't think I've seen anyone else using this. I know Metabrusque put out a video involving it not too long ago. However, I think that was in the weekly pack. So if he puts some axe handle teams into the customs pool, I've somehow managed to avoid all of them so far. And number 2 is surgeonfish. This is another strange one. It's another one that has had its ability changed since the update. It's now a faint pet, but it gives a ton of health for a very small number of trumpets to 2 units. And yet, despite all the new trumpet pets being added, I don't think I've seen any of them at all. Probably not for the last 2 patches. I wouldn't be surprised if it's been over 6 months since I last saw a surgeonfish in customs, unless I just wasn't paying attention the one time someone ran it. So that just leaves number 1 on this list. Which one do you think it would be? Obviously at the bottom we've got a bunch of honourable mentions, and I was excluding both Moby Dick and Hippogriff from this since they're kind of special cases. Although for sure I've seen more hippogriffs than surgeonfish and axe handle hounds. But that just leaves as number 1 the Old Mouse. Now, Old Mouse is another unit that has been changed recently. Originally, it was end turn that it would summon a toy, and a lot of the toys were very, very powerful. But I believe it was changed to start of turn, which kind of makes it a lot more awkward. And it was already a pretty awkward unit. Now, something did need to be done about it because some of the toys were just way too strong, but I think probably they should have just toned down the toys instead of making the unit much harder to use. But at the same time, having it start of turn does mean you have the whole shop phase to decide what you're going to do. It's just that I don't think I've seen anyone use this. I haven't even seen a single team that was running one of the toys from the Old Mouse, even if they didn't have the Old Mouse on board. So let me know in the comments, what do you think is the least common unit in the whole of custom packs? I gave this a lot of thought, and I'm pretty confident in my top 3. Alright, next list we're moving on to is one I'm calling the Meme Build Toolkit. And this is the set of pets which probably I use the most in terms of trying to record videos in custom packs. A lot of these are absolutely essential if you're trying to make an unusual team. And oftentimes removing some of these from your pack will massively increase the difficulty level, even just to get a win, let alone get a meme build going. Now I will say first of all, I have forgotten to put Betafish on here. Betafish is probably one of my most bought tier 3s. It's absolutely incredible in customs. And it's kind of embarrassing that I forgot it, but yeah, we just ran out of space at the bottom on the honourable mentions. So number 10, I'm going with Bad Dog, and this is specifically for the toy that summons the Great One. What's it called? Evil Book. I think Evil Book is one of the most useful toys in the game because it can massively increase the power level of your team. There are so many things that it synergizes with, and oftentimes it can be really helpful in just getting a draw and extending the game long enough to get your weird combo going. Then at 9 we've got Albatross. Now Albatross is only going to be relevant for certain types of builds, but it is so important for so many of the lower tier pets. If you think about things like Flycatcher, Iguana, Dolphin, even stuff like Lynx, which is already quite powerful, being able to power up those pet snipes makes a massive difference. And there are so many builds. If you go back over the videos for the last year, maybe the last year and a half, if you include the original Wolverine, which had the same ability as the Albatross, there are so many of those builds that just had no chance whatsoever without the Albatross on board. Now Frog at number 8 is an incredibly useful pet as well. It used to be one of those units that was very weak at tier 1. Then you would stack it up to level 2 or 3 and be able to swap the stats from your low tier unit, usually a jellyfish, onto something in the late game. But these days you can use it almost immediately as level 1 because you can swap the stats between tier 1s and 2s to your heart's content. So if you take a tier 1 or a tier 2 that has a terrible stat line, common example would be something like a Swan, you can immediately swap the stats from another tier 2 or tier 1 that has either good stats from buffs that they've received or just a much better starting stat line, things like Frigate Bird and Sphinx. So Frog is incredibly important in setting up that platform for your meme team in the early game. But it also still has relevance in the late game as well if you want to carry it all the way. As a sell pet, it also allows you to use Elk to increase its value. Number 7 is Beluga Whale. Beluga Whale is such a useful ability. It was on the cusp of being changed on the recent test server, but it managed to dodge the bullet. I think it ended up just getting a base stats nerf. But there's so much stuff you can do with it. It allows you to have an extra summon if you're doing a nested summon with a slug, for instance, so all those friend ahead abilities can go off an extra time. It allows you just to protect units from snipes, so you can put the unit that you want to summon inside the beluga, and then when it pops out, it's still going to have all its stats. It could still have triple base stats if your beluga's level 3 and you're not too bothered about the beluga getting knocked out by snipes. You can also just throw chocolate cake on it and shortcut to a higher level unit that way. But of course we also have access to Pteranodon in customs, and you can actually use Beluga Whale to duplicate a bunch of belugas and then fill them full of high tier units that are extremely powerful. I've definitely done a few videos on that before. Number 6 is the old classic alpaca. Although it's had its ability changed in the past, it's still a mainstay of many custom packs. I often don't take it just for variety's sake, but there are so many runs on YouTube that are indebted to the alpaca, they just wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Number 5, we've got a newcomer, it's the pelican. The ability for the pelican was completely reworked with the Star Pack update. Now, instead of working like a scalar, it works like the whale, so it can swallow a unit that has strawberry. And the thing about this that makes it so unique is the fact that it can swallow a unit that is not immediately in front of it, which is the main limitation of whale. So you can have a unit right at the front, you can put your pelican at the back. As long as the unit at the front has strawberry, the pelican will still swallow it. Now, strawberry units are quite susceptible to ailments. However, with the introduction of churros, which is a food which makes abilities go off with a higher priority, you can all but guarantee that your pelican is going to work without any ailments interfering with the strawberry. And couple that with the fact that the salmon that the pelican spits out is extremely strong as well. This is just an all-round versatile and powerful unit that probably would be in a lot more videos if I wasn't deliberately trying to maintain variety. Number 4 is Cyclops, obviously very similar to Alpaca in the sense that it's going to help you shortcut levels. Many meme builds rely on getting high level pets early in order to beat the regular teams that you encounter. And with Cyclops being available on tier 4, so you can get it turn 5, it's obviously much more accessible than Alpaca. And there are plenty of other pets and foods on the same ballpark that interact really favorably with it, like Crow. And also we've got Stoat, a couple of spots above it. But number 3, first we've got to talk about the spider. The spider is ludicrously OP in custom packs. It's an auto take in any custom pack, specifically because you can tailor what it can spawn. In Turtle Pack, spider's fine, but you don't have any control over which units it's going to produce, so you can get some good spawns like sheep or camel, but you can also get some bad spawns like the elephant. In customs, you just do not have that problem. You can pick 10 pets to go inside the spider, and all of them will be good options. But more importantly than that, it allows you to shortcut level ups on tier 3s, so you can get a level 2 spider, pill it, and then you're much closer to getting your level 3 tier 3. And there are plenty of extremely powerful tier 3 units in the game, which can have a drastic effect on the rest of your meme run. Number 2, we've already mentioned it, is the Stoat. No surprise here. This is my most bought tier 2, I think. Even though it was only added in Golden Pack, I think I've bought it more than every single tier 2 in the game. Obviously it has a pretty heavy RNG element, and it's much weaker than Spider in terms of trying to maintain tempo in the early game. But again, you can set your pack up in such a way that you're going to get good results from selling a Stoat, and then make decisions accordingly afterwards. It's also just one of the most fun units to use in the game, because it creates these rare scenarios where you get early level 3s or unlikely combinations of high level units. And oftentimes the 1-1 stat line on the spawned unit can be completely circumvented either with just combining from level 2 or using something like the frog to swap the stats. Now, what do you think is going to be number 1 here? Have I missed anything out other than Betta Fish? Well, it's time to reveal that number 1 in the meme build toolkit is the Wyvern, or Wyvern as many people refer to it. Now, Wyvern made the cut for Rev's top 10 to much derision from some commenters. I definitely understand where he's coming from. I don't think I would rate it as number 1 on the top 10 meme build toolkit, but I couldn't resist having the Wyvern reveal. All jokes aside though, this is an extremely useful unit if you're trying to get a meme build off the ground. Usually if you're going for a meme build, you have to try and force a high roll. And the Wyvern increases the chances of finding duplicates early of units that you need. and it can rapidly speed up the process if you're trying to hit a specific sequence of level ups, on turn 5 and turn 7. I guess even turn 9, you can definitely keep Wyvern as long as that. So yeah, extremely useful unit. Doesn't really deserve the number 1 spot, but yeah, I couldn't resist. Alright, next up is a category which maybe a lot of people wouldn't have expected here. We are going to do top 10 artwork later on in the video, but first we're going to look at retired or unused artwork. And by retired artwork, I mean art that was in the game, but then it was taken out at a later date and you can no longer use it. And then of course there's unused artwork as well, which is stuff that appeared on the test server and then never saw the light of day. So at number 10, we've got the Kiwi. Now the Kiwi artwork was redone, I think, around the time of the Star Pack update. And this guy used to be the standard art and it was replaced. You can still use the original art, but this one was removed from the game. I'm not a massive fan of it, but it was actually kind of difficult coming up with a list of 10 retired artwork that I actually like. So the Kiwi is just here to make up the numbers. Now Hercules Beetle at number 9 is an odd one that I've never understood. I did ask the developers about why this was removed and why you're not able to select it as the classic option for the Hercules Beetle. And they said it wasn't classic enough. So yeah, maybe not the response I was hoping for, but this guy used to be in the main game and was completely removed. You can't pick him anymore. I've actually kind of warmed up to the new Hercules Beetle art, so it's not the end of the world. Number 8 is an odd one. This is Baku, as seen in some of the promotional material for Unicorn Pack. And actually at the bottom in the honourable mentions you can see we've got Bunyip as well. The two of them had these different appearances, and I think there were some other pets from Unicorn that ended up being redrawn. But this Baku one, I actually really like it. And I kind of wish that was available as a toggle option in the artwork. A lot of the units that have been added since Golden Pack don't have alternate art. Since the game already supports the option, I think it would be pretty easy to add them. So yeah, I would be a big fan of them adding this Baku art to the game. The number 7 is Polar Bear. This is another one that was redone twice. And the new Polar Bear looks very strange. It looks more like a realistic drawing of a polar bear than a cartoon one. I guess the opposite extreme to the one that's on screen now. So not really sure why this got removed. Again, it would be great if it was reinstated. Now number 6 is more of a subtle one. Maybe you haven't even noticed that German Shepherd was redone. They changed the tail and they changed the pattern on its chest. I have no idea why. I always thought this was one of the best pieces of art in Golden Pack, but now it's slightly different and you don't get the classic option to switch back to. Same goes for the guinea fowl, number 5. This is what it used to look like. It was kind of happy and smiley, and then they removed the happy expression from it. Again, no clue why. Number 4 is interesting because the artwork here, the quality is extremely poor because I had to capture this from a video still. This is the original jellyfish art, and it was actually redone twice before Star Pack launched way back in the day. I always liked this one, and I kind of wish that it was available to select. I like the current jellyfish art as well, but this one just always looked like something completely different to a lot of the other pets, which I felt like that was appropriate for a jellyfish. Number 3, this one isn't that old. It's the original amalgamation from the test server. This one probably looks the most polished of all the unused art. And I'm not really sure why they redrew it because I think this looks a lot better than the one that's in the game. But again, this is one that could easily be available as a classic option if you wanted to switch between them. And now 1 and 2, we've got Toad and Salamander, and I'm going to group these together because you might look at them and think, aren't these just the sprites that are in the game? Well, not quite, because they were downgraded, in my opinion, to have much lower detail. So the feet on both the Salamander and the Toad were smoothed out, so they don't look like they're webbed anymore, which, yeah, I don't understand why they did that. And unfortunately, these two were removed from the game, so you can't actually switch back to them. You can only go back to the original ones, which admittedly are pretty ropey looking. So yeah, I still use the standard art for both of these pets. It's just not the standard art that I wanted. And then there's a few interesting ones in the honourable mentions at the bottom. We've got some very funny ones like the orangutan and the pillbug from the original Star Pack test server. And then we've got some other recent redrawn ones like the mantis and the puppy, which were both deleted completely. Alright, this next list is the top 10 units that I had never heard of prior to them being added to SAP. Now, most of these I think are fair enough. You wouldn't be expected to know what some of these more unusual animals are, or creatures from mythology that you've never heard of before. But I think every single one of these I had to go online and research them, because seeing these in the patch notes was the first time I'd ever heard of any of them. Now, some of them there isn't all that much information on online. I did try and look into Cali Greyhound because I was using it in so many videos, but the information on it was pretty sparse. In the honourable mentions, we've got Kappa, which was something that I thought was a modern invention and was nothing to do with mythology. The Shima Inaga is a bird that I wish I'd known about sooner because it is ridiculously cute. And the Ogopogo seems like a complete rip-off of Nessie, which really offends me as a Scotsman. And definitely here, this list skews towards the mythological creatures from Unicorn Pack. But at number 2, we do have the red-lipped batfish, which is an absolute nightmare to look at in-game. But apparently that's almost exactly what it looks like in real life. So yeah, I could have done without knowing that those things existed. And maybe something similar can be said about number 1 on this list. Make your guesses now. I will reveal that it is the sarcastic fringe head. And the artwork on this one, it's kind of odd, but I think it's pretty appropriate. It's just the name to me that is absolutely insane. Why would you name a fish a sarcastic fringe head? I don't think many fish are known for their sarcasm. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if you know why this creature is called a sarcastic fringe head instead of just a fringe head. Alright, we've had retired artwork, now we're going to move on to retired abilities. So these are pets with abilities that used to be different, either slightly different in terms of the way they function in game, or completely revised while keeping the same artwork. And there are actually way more of these than I thought there were, but I suppose it's not surprising since we've passed 3 years since I started playing Super Auto Pets, as hard as that is to believe. So starting at the top, we've got Seal at number 10. Obviously Seal's ability is still very similar to what it used to have, but I think functionally it's nowhere near where it was. And I was definitely an advocate of nerfing Seal and Squirrel at number 9 because they were both extremely powerful, way too strong the way they were. But I think there's a good amount of nostalgia for the time when you realised that you could probably win with almost anything as long as you could get your Seal online early enough. And there are many fun runs I had where I was trying to win with like 5 buses or 5 rams. And the only realistic way of doing that was going to be with a Seal. Those days are over. I think it's for the best. But yeah, there are definitely a few nostalgic tears to be shed for Seal. And Squirrel at number 9 as well. Squirrel had a very fun ability way back where it would replace the entire shop with food. So all the pets would disappear and you would just get a bunch of food selections. Squirrel doesn't generate any new food anymore. It just discounts the existing food. But it's a much fairer ability and I still think it's reasonably strong in customs. Maybe not so much in Turtle. I'm not sure how people feel about it there. Number 8 is Stego, and Stego is an interesting case because it's another one of these units that was supposed to be nerfed, but in practice it actually became stronger. So originally Stego's ability used to work like level 1 Hatching Chick, so it would just give the turn number in stats on end turn. And so that could be abused by putting Stego behind Leopard or Rooster, lots of pets whose abilities are dependent on their stats. Then it was changed to Start of Battle, and the unfortunate side effect of that is that now it works with Parrot, it works with Tiger, it works with Pug, and it's just had more and more things added to the game, really, that help it power up extremely early and allow you to gain a ridiculous amount of stats. And at some point they also changed Stego's ability so that it would still work if a pet had an ailment instead of a perk. Originally that wasn't the case. So all round an extremely strong unit, and I'm not surprised that it ended up getting moved to customs only in the Star Pack reshuffle. Number 7 is the Beetle, and I've mentioned this one many times in Dromedary videos I think recently. Beetle's old ability was to buff the health of shop pets when you fed it. So you could pair it with Dromedary in the original puppy pack, and then you would just stack food onto the Beetle, which would buff the health of the units that the Dromedary was also buffing. And you could end up creating some really funny lopsided units that had way more health than attack, and oftentimes that was going to be strong enough to win you the game. So fair enough that it ended up being nerfed, but I kind of wish it came back in some form, even if there was some kind of limit on the number of times you could feed the Beetle. Not least because they've added tons of specific feeding pets with all the corn cob units. I think it has a place in customs. Number 6 is the Dog. And the dog has had a few different abilities, I think. The current one I'm not a massive fan of. It's probably a bit underplayed in customs considering how good it is. But the old ability was ridiculously strong, and I think probably misunderstood way back at the start. The way it used to work is every time you bought something, the dog would randomly gain 1 health or 1 attack. And that was quite interesting because you could end up with a dog that had really high attack and very low health, or really high health and very low attack, or you could get lucky and it would even out and it would just be a strong unit overall. But ultimately, as more and more buy-sell pets got added to the game, this just became way too strong. And I'm sure someone somewhere has probably done a video where they got a 50-50 dog and turned 7 or 8 or something ridiculous like that. Unsurprisingly, that resulted in the ability being reworked, and I think the game has definitely been better for it. That doesn't mean it wasn't fun at the time though. Number 5 is Tapir. It's already been in a list, but this time I think it's kind of a shame really that Tapir's ability had to be changed. The main reason I think is that it just kept cropping up in infinite combos because it allowed you to duplicate units in the shop. And of course you can just put Mushroom on a Tapir and then get another level 3 Tapir and just repeat the process. There were also some really obnoxious combos you could do with it in battle. So you could have the Tapir replicate a Great One, and then you just have an entire team of Tapirs with the Evil Book toy, and it would just go out of control because of the base stats of Great One. But yeah, I do definitely miss the days of pilling Tapirs to get duplicate units. But I suppose at this stage in the game's life cycle, there are so many ways to get duplicates that it's more the random in-battle summon ability that I really miss. Number 4 is the Wombat. Now, Wombat still has an ability that is very similar to what it used to have. However, it was changed from start of battle to before battle. And this makes a massive difference in the overall utility of the unit. It's not unusable as it is, but really it wasn't all that oppressive in the previous versions, given that it's one of those units that could end up doing absolutely nothing in a battle on one round, and then the next round it copies a level 3 Lionfish. Maybe there's still a chance for it to have the old ability reinstated. Number 3 is Mothman, and Mothman is one of those units that didn't seem particularly strong at all. In fact, it really wasn't. But it ended up having its ability completely reworked and the old one was thrown out. The old one used to be on feint, deal damage to units that have ailments, which I thought was an interesting niche to fill and allowed you to combo it with quite a few different things. Probably more so in customs than in Unicorn Pack itself. But yeah, I was sad to see that ability go. This is one where I would definitely have no qualms about its ability being added back into customs on a different unit. Number 2 is Lionfish, and it's been a long time since Lionfish was changed. But aside from the nightmares that were caused by the original rework of this being way too strong, the old ability in which the Lionfish would give weakness to the frontmost pet on the opposing team before friend attacks was the only way that free-to-play players had access to any ailments. That ability, or at least one like it, should have been left in place for free-to-play players, because not having access to any ailments at all is a massive disadvantage in custom packs. And honestly, I could live without the current version of the Lionfish ability. We've got a lot of pets that do damage on feint, and there really wasn't any need for another one. So number 1, what do you think it's going to be? We've got a lot of things at the bottom of the screen here in the honourable mentions, but number 1 slot is reserved for the Snail. Now everyone knows that the old Snail was completely busted, however it was also ridiculously fun. And I have many old recordings of me filling the entire shop with snails, because if you're not aware, its ability used to work on buy, which meant that you could stock up on snails, and as soon as you lost, you could just buy them all one after the other, stack them up to a level 2 or 3, get an insane amount of buffs in one turn, and then that was it. The snail was useless for the rest of the game. Thinking about it now, it's not too dissimilar to the way pets like Starfish work in the current version, where you get a massive injection of stats in one go. However, this unit was pretty toxic for versus, so I can fully understand why it ended up getting changed. I mean, it was too strong for Arena as well, but at the same time, this is very similar to Seal and Squirrel, in that the level of nostalgia for the old Snail is just off the charts. Alright, we're halfway through, so we're moving on to the first and only negative top 10. And originally I was going to have a bunch of these, but I decided I would rather have the video be an overall positive experience. And so I've taken multiple negative lists and combined them all together. So a lot of these units will be in this list for different reasons, but all of them have something about them that bothers me and probably will continue to bother me unless they're either patched or reworked. So number 10, we've got Tiger. I've talked about Tiger many times about how strong it is. It's extremely prevalent because, as Rev put it in his top 10 video, it's extremely low effort for high reward. You can place a Tiger behind a 50 attack unit whose ability works based off of attack, and then the value of that unit just absolutely skyrockets. The fact that Tiger can work on multiple units in the same turn is also extremely irritating, and the only reason it's number 10 is because it does allow some creative builds to function, which realistically wouldn't have any chance unless the Tiger was available. I definitely would put Tiger in the overplayed category, as many of the pets in this list are. Number 9 is definitely not overplayed, it's the Werewolf. I'm not really sure I would categorize it as cringe either, but it is very annoying because of the way its ability works. So Werewolf only works at night, which means that if you face it on an odd turn, it will be pretty weak, and if you face it on an even turn, it will be very strong. And recently I've gone on a streak of going against even turn werewolves only. I don't know how many it was, but it was a ridiculous number before I finally saw one in the daytime. And that has traumatized me, and so it makes number 9 on the list. Werewolf has become a bit more interesting since they added the oyster mushroom, but at the same time oyster mushroom is pretty broken, so yeah, I'm not really sure how you could go about reworking the werewolf and not have it be annoying in an arena format. Number 8, we've got the Ammonite. I'm sure a lot of people really like Ammonite, but for me it's one of the worst recent additions to the game because it means that a lot of games, especially in Star Pack Arena, degenerate into playing against one level 3 Ammonite and then 3 scalers or early game pets that all become level 3 Mimic Octos. And it just results in very dull gameplay, not least to mention the fact that you can also get a permanent Mimic Octo from Mantis or just pilling in customs. I always support them adding more unique token pets to the game, but I think this unit was definitely not the way to go about it. Number 7 is Rabbit. It looks so sweet and innocent, but the Rabbit has been a nightmare for quite a while. It was toned down in a recent update where it only has 5 triggers now, but I still think it's pretty strong given that you can just stack multiple rabbits and still get a ridiculous amount of health in one go. A very common strategy you see in customs is people stacking rabbits in order to abuse some of the foods like broccoli and fried shrimp, basically removing any of the downsides of using those. Just an all-round menace of a unit. Number 6 is Jellyfish, and I'm sure this is probably on a lot of people's top 10 list of favourite units because it is extremely common, so it definitely comes under the overplayed category. And I guess maybe that's due to ease of use. It's a tier 2 unit that benefits from level ups, so you're constantly leveling units up in the early game, which means that the Jellyfish just accrues stats for free and can rapidly become a very large unit. With all the transformation mechanics that are in the game now, being able to gain stats from an early game unit and then turn it into a powerful high tier unit, it's just so strong. And I think it's not surprising that a lot of people are going down that road in custom packs. Now 5 is the Moth, which maybe to some people would be a surprise pick. I think it's incredibly common and overplayed, probably because it's a free-to-play unit. Even though it is in Puppy Pack, some of the units that were added to Puppy were originally from the first batch of free-to-play stuff from Customs. And the reason I don't like this is that it was given back its old ability. Recently it was patched so that it wouldn't work on itself if you put it up the front. But now it works the same way it used to. I don't know why they reverted that. But the effect of this is that you're very frequently seeing lots of teams that have a huge Moth because the attack that it gives can be so useful, especially when combined with many of the low tier pets that have been quote unquote balanced by having low attack, high health, such as the Camel, number 4. Actually, I guess is the Camel a 3-4 or a 2-4? I can't remember. But this is a perfect example of a unit that you can buy, put it up the front, spam broccoli onto it, and then have the Moth just give it a bunch of attack to even it out. There are lots of other pets in the same category. We've also got a guinea fowl at the bottom of the screen there. But for me, Camel is extremely overplayed. And while it might not be the strongest pet in the game, it is incredibly annoying to get matched with a Camel team that managed to stat it up very quickly and then just bought garlic. It's no surprise these days that I find myself taking an abundance of ailment pets in almost every custom pack I play. Number 3 is Sea Anemone, which is a real shame because I love the artwork for this unit. Unfortunately, it is the recipient of the original Starfish ability, which was a super toxic ability on tier 3, which got bumped up to tier 4. Basically, it just gives stats to friends on buy cells, but this was an ability that should have just been deleted from the game altogether. And unfortunately, it was left in. And despite many nerfs over the years, buy sell is still extremely strong. There are so many ways to gain gold and extend turns that oftentimes these buy sell teams just get out of control. They're probably some of the most boring teams you can possibly play or face in customs, and yet they're still extremely popular. Number 2, no surprise, it's the Behemoth. And Behemoth is kind of an odd case because it has an ability which is completely unique. So you would think that it would be interesting, and there are definitely 1 or 2 interesting things you can do with it, but unfortunately it has completely warped the meta of customs. It is not uncommon to end a run losing to 4 or 5 Behemoth teams in a row. And it's not really surprising if you think about it. I mean, there are units like Sauropod, which is a 4/12 stat line, that I will buy just for the stat line. So why wouldn't I buy a 12/12 that immediately becomes a 14/14? It just doesn't make any sense at all. It essentially has 3 different abilities because it has the 12/12 stat line, which is an ability in itself, the 2/2 stat gain at end turn for free, and the fact that it can break the 50/50 cap. And to be honest, you could probably argue that actually breaking the cap almost counts as 2 abilities because you can end up one-shotting units through Melon even without any damage multiplication, simply because the Behemoth's attack is so high. Again, this is a unit that is massively overplayed, probably because it's so strong and also so easy to play. And I guess that's partly because scaling is just overall the most popular archetype in the game by a country mile, even though it was never really designed to be an archetype in the first place. So what does that leave for the number 1 most annoying pet in the game? And I think this one probably fits all 3 categories of annoying, cringe, and overplayed. And top marks to anyone who guessed Brain Cramp. Now, although I don't really play the weekly all that often, I do know that many a recent weekly has been ruined by the presence of Brain Cramp and a ton of other jump pets. But this is a unit that I've disliked from day one, and I really think it needs an ability rework. It's kind of crazy to think that in Unicorn Pack, where ailments are flying everywhere, and Melon isn't available until the very late game, that you have a tier 3 unit that can basically heal itself, so it's immune to ailments, and then it also is immune to damage because it has Melon, which is essentially invincibility in the early game. This is especially problematic in customs because, again, this is a unit that's been balanced based around its base stats, so I think it starts as a 1-2, but in customs that just means absolutely nothing. So yeah, it's not surprising that Brain Cramp is one of the most popular and one of the most annoying, if not the most annoying, in the entire game. Alright, let's go back to being positive. This is the top 10 most underrated units in my opinion. So number 10, we've seen it already, the Black Bear. For some reason, very few people take this in customs despite the fact that it's available to everyone. It's a very good ability, and given that the meta is 90% scaling, stat reduction units are extremely good. I don't know why more people don't play this pet. Number 9 is Foodog. I think Foodog is one of those really useful units for meme builds. Did I have it in the honorable mentions on that? I don't remember. But it's permanent shop scaling available from turn 3. I think the balancing job they did with this is quite nice, where it can only buff the next shop tier. So it does kind of limit how much you can actually stack it, but when you get a Foodog high roll going, it can be extremely difficult for opposing teams to deal with. And I think probably this one is a lot better than most people give it credit for. Number 8 is Pug, formerly a tier 2 unit. It used to be one of the best pets in the game. It definitely still is extremely useful. However, it's kind of fallen out of favour and I very rarely see anyone use it. I guess maybe that's partly because of gingerbread. But personally, I would rather use a Pug and not have to give a unit gingerbread when I could be giving it one of the better perks. As soon as you have a level 2 Pug, being able to instantly level up units from the higher tiers is so powerful, And it's really surprising to me that I just don't see this very often, especially with Star Pack being so old at this point. You would imagine a very high percentage of players that are still around already have access to it. Number 7 is Frigate Bird. Now, Frigate Bird is in Puppy Pack, but it is a free unit, so you do have access to it even if you're only free to play. And I think the usefulness of Frigate Bird is just increased and increased as more pets have been added to the game. There are so many ailments available, even at tier 1 now, that Frigate Bird can be very relevant from turn 3 onwards all the way through to the endgame. Obviously, Unicorn is going to be a bit better in some circumstances, but being able to feed perks to other units with pets like Axolotl in existence is also extremely good. And of course, you can use the ability to give rice to improve gold efficiency in the shop phase. Number 6 is Squid. I mentioned it before for all the same reasons. I don't know why more people don't play this unit. It's extremely good, very cheap to activate, and it has a great stat line. Number 5 is Raccoon, another unit that was in the revamped Puppy Pack, but it ended up getting taken out and returned to being customs only. This used to be a tier 2 unit. I'm pretty sure it was tier 2. Was it tier 2 or 3? Maybe it was moved from 2 up to 3 and then eventually moved to 5, but you could argue that it could be a tier 6 because its ability to steal perks from opposing units, not just copy them like the hare, but completely steal them, is extremely powerful. And honestly, if I was playing free-to-play only, I would have this in my pack 100% of the time. The number of opposing teams that have Coconut at the front from Mongoose is so high, you would think that Raccoon would be an auto pick in so many builds. Number 4 is Seahorse. I've been talking about Seahorse for so long. It eventually got moved from tier 1 to tier 2, which is more than justified for the strength of this ability. But it only got stronger when they added Ibex, and there are definitely more push synergies in the game than there ever have been. In an arena format, being able to disrupt the order of the opposing team is so important. And while I have definitely lost plenty of games in customs to a Seahorse team, the frequency with which I encounter it is way too low relative to the strength of the ability. Being able to mess up Elephant Blowfish teams is reason enough to take it for sure. Number 3 is Nurse Shark. Now obviously there was a time when Nurse Shark was one of the best pets in the game, and facing it 5 turns in a row in customs was not unheard of, but these days I almost never see it. I think a lot of people prefer just to take the biggest retriever summon they can get, but in customs you can multiply the damage from Nurse Shark so many ways. We've got Mushroom, we've got Anubis, we can apply tons of different ailments to other pets. I think Nurse Shark is massively slept on, and I'm sure RevGT will agree with me on this one. Number 2 is Manticore. Now, Manticore is an unbelievably strong pet, and yet I still think it's underrated because very few people play it, and the vast majority of the time you only see people taking Manticore plus Red Dragon as a means to remove the opposing backline. But I think Manticore is just an extremely useful unit because it synergizes with so many ailment pets that are in the game now. I mean, we have Squid at number 6. How often do you see Squid Manticore? But the main beneficiary from Manticore is weakness because it doesn't go away after the first hit. There are so many devastating teams that you can make with Manticore plus weakness, and I've got a few of them recorded, so maybe we'll see them in the near future. So number 1, what do you think is going to be my number 1 most underrated unit? We've got a few honourable mentions at the bottom here, but I think the number 1 for me has to go to the Cuckoo. And I've done a video on the Cuckoo not too long ago. I think its ability is massively slept on. It is so good for disrupting summon teams. The way it works is that when an opposing pet faints, it immediately summons a Cuckoo Chick up front for them. So if that was a summon unit on their side of the board, they lose out on the summon completely. And in some cases, that can just be absolutely crushing. Level 3 Eagle, yeah, you don't get the summon from that. Level 3 Nessie, summoning a 50-50 boat, yep, you get a 1-1 chick instead. This thing synergizes with so many different units. It works with all the knockout pets, it works with the enemy summon pets like Flycatcher and Aardvark, both of which are probably lower ranked in terms of power level, but I think the Cuckoo really does improve their outlook quite significantly. So for me, Cuckoo is number 1. Let me know in the comments, which pet do you think is the most underrated in the game? Alright, I promised it earlier on, we're finally up to the top 10 best artwork list. Now I have done some art tier list videos in the past, but pets are being added to this game at such a rate that a lot of these lists are changing all the time. And it was actually very difficult to narrow this down to a top 10, so we also have an abundance of honourable mentions at the bottom. There are probably another 20 or so that I would put amongst my favourites. And it is very interesting to note that a lot of these are recent additions to the game, and there aren't that many old pets in the list. Number 10 is the capybara, which I think still has the same artwork as it had when it was first added to the game. At some stage it was going to be revised slightly, and then they backtracked. So I'm glad about that, because I think it's kind of iconic with a little bird on its back, and it's just a fun unit to play as well. 9 is Frostwolf, a little bit more serious looking, but I just love the colour palette on this unit. It definitely looks cold, and although the unit is a little bit annoying in customs, I think one of the absolute slam dunks from the Unicorn Pack artwork selection. 8 is the Tadpole, which is one of the only branded new units that I've added to any of these lists. I've maybe not mentioned it so far, but I really wasn't considering any of the brand new units, especially for some of the lists based on their strength, because it's very difficult to tell early on for sure how strong certain units are. But in the case of artwork, it doesn't matter in the slightest. The Tadpole is absolutely adorable. And I kind of wish, because the Tadpole turns into the frog, that they would redo the standard frog artwork to match this one. I'm sure the artist that did this Tadpole drawing could create a matching frog emoji and make the unit overall just that bit more cohesive. Number 7 is the Anteater. This is another one where I don't really understand why the artwork was redrawn. It's very similar to this one, except the outline is a bit more deformed, like it kind of looks like it has a hunched back. But this is my favourite, I think, from the original batch of new units that were added when they launched Star Pack way back. And it continues to be to this day. This is actually a weird one because you cannot manually switch to the old Anteater artwork in the pet customization options, but if you toggle all the pets at the same time, the Anteater will go back to the classic art. There are a few other units like that. So it is still accessible, even though it can't be selected directly from the menu. Number 6 is the Fire Pup, which is a token unit that can only be accessed using Cerberus. And I just absolutely love this. I kind of wish that it was a tier 1 by default instead of being a token. It's just that good. But at the same time, it does make going for that token achievement that much more enjoyable. It's actually something I really need to get back to doing after failing miserably on the weekly. Number 5 is Sea Urchin. This one has actually been redone as well. And initially I was a little bit disappointed, but honestly the new one is so similar to the previous one that it hasn't been that big of an adjustment to get used to the new one. One of my favourite units in the game, probably a little bit on the strong side for a tier 2, but it's also much more commonly seen now because of seaweed being added to Star Pack. So now you see the Sea Urchin all the time in Golden Pack and in Star Pack as well because it's such a good perk. Number 4 is another token unit, the Bee. And initially, I think when the artwork was redone for Turtle Pack, I didn't use the reworked bee art, but I've since switched to it and I don't know if I can go back now because it is so cute. Although there was a lot of art in the Turtle Pack redo that I wasn't a fan of, this one is just absolutely incredible and I think definitely deserves a place in the top 5. Now number 3 is Leviathan, and I feel like Leviathan has a case to be number 1 in the entire game. However, the last few months of Leviathan spam in customs has maybe had a negative effect on it in my mind, and so it drops down to number 3 here, but I love the way the colours contrast in this, and the fact that it has the kind of downturned eyelid as though it's just chilling out at the bottom of the sea. So well drawn and a great addition to the game. Number 2 is another new unit, the Shima Inaga. Extremely cute looking bird with the with its head turned on one side. How can you not love this thing? It's actually kind of unique as well because it spawns tokens which are copies of itself. So it's kind of like the locust that spawns locusts that don't have an ability. I actually haven't checked that. Do the spawn Shima Inaga have no ability or not? I have to make a mental note to double check that the next time I'm in the game. And at number 1, maybe this isn't going to be much of a surprise to anyone who's been watching the videos since the previous mini pack was released, but my number 1 is another ridiculously cute little bird. It is the pink robin. But just an incredibly adorable image. Unfortunately, this is a unit that you don't see all that often, probably because it is part of the mini pack. I really hope in the near future that the mini packs are giftable so that we can start increasing the number of players that have access to all these units. And then there are tons of honourable mentions at the bottom here. I find it very difficult to leave Slime off the top 10, but I think maybe that's because Tadpole has just bumped it off the list, and they do look very similar. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same artist that drew both of them. Alright, the penultimate list is the top 10 of my personal favourites, or just the units that I have the most fun with in the current version of the game. Many of these will be similar to the original list I did like this. I will link that video in the description if I can find it. But of course there have been tons of new pets added since I made that video, and I'm sure a bunch of things have shuffled around as well because they've either had their abilities changed or maybe they've moved tiers. And the game is constantly changing, so it's no surprise that these lists change as well. Number 10 is Beluga Whale. I'm sure this was on the list before. It's just an incredibly fun unit to use and it's so versatile. You could make a case for having Abomination on this list as well, which is another unit that quote-unquote swallows pets from the shop. But I think Abomination is one of my least played units from Unicorn Pack, even though there are loads of cool things you can do with it in customs. I suppose the niche for crazy Abomination builds is already being filled by Infected Player, but at some point I will get around to using it. Obviously there have been tons and tons of Beluga Whale videos on this channel, so no surprise that it makes the top 10. Number 9 is Falcon, and I think I left Falcon off the list last time for Egyptian Vulture, which has been demoted down to the honourable mentions. And maybe that's just because I didn't give Falcon enough credit in the first place, but it's also because we now have access to units like Sarcastic Fringehead, where we can put units onto the opposing team that we want the Falcon to copy. Falcon is just a generally fun unit because it's so unpredictable, where you end up copying strange sequences of pets from the opposing team. And there's also been a change to Fig recently, which now works before attack, so you can actually use it much more successfully with Falcon compared to the start of battle version. Number 8 is Anglerfish. It's probably been a long time since I've done a puppy pack run where I wasn't trying to use Anglerfish. Now I will admit I don't use it all that much in customs. There have been a few times where I've really honed in on it and tried to steal something from an opposing team, especially if I know that specific teams are out there in the pool. Maybe they've got a rare token pet. But I think the majority of the time it's a bit of a struggle to really make use of it in customs without going down the road of shop scaling, and that's something that I've really tried to phase out from videos in recent times. Although maybe there will be some shop scaling runs in the background of this video to use up some of the backlog. Number 7 is Pelican. I think I've talked about it already today. It is an incredibly flexible unit with an ultra strong ability. I often don't like playing the units that have the strongest abilities, but there are a few on this list that have really powerful abilities. The reason they make the list is because they allow you to do things that are otherwise impossible. And the Pelican allows you to feint a unit on your own team at start of battle without being directly behind it. And that is extremely useful for a whole range of different unusual builds. I kind of just wish that Pelican was able to spawn different things other than just salmon. I think it would be more interesting if there were 1 or 2 different tokens that it could spawn, and that might be able to lower the power level a bit, but also increase the variety in some of the videos, because I do sometimes feel bad just absolutely decimating opposing teams with 50-50 salmon sniping 3 or 4 times. Number 6 is Anubis, another ultra strong pet, but I think a lot of people love this unit because it introduces an entirely new way of constructing a team. And it really gives a new perspective to a lot of the feint pets if you try and work out how they're going to interact with your squad and the opposing team when their feints go off at start of battle. This is one of those units that may well be impossible to balance, and I feel like the fact that it creates so many unusual squads is probably worth it, even if it probably is broken at tier 4. Number 5 is Small One, and maybe this is because Great One was retired, justifiably because it was way too strong, but I've always enjoyed units that allow you to hurt your own team and the opposing team, which makes them useful in both the shop phase and the battle phase. And Small One has the rare trigger condition of working on summoned. So I think the only others are the Great One from the Evil Book, and then there's also Scorpion. Oh, of course there's a Salmon from Pelican as well. But I would really like to see them explore more summoned triggers, because it is very interesting trying to make these units work in battle. And actually, Beluga Whale at number 10 is the perfect vehicle for a small one if you don't have access to Mushroom, for example. Number 4 is Amalgamation. Again, I would like to use the other artwork for Amalgamation, but this one is fine as well. I really like the way that this bridges a bunch of different archetypes at once. It works as a summon support unit. It works for ailment scaling with Unicorn. It works with Tardigrade, which is a unit down at the bottom in the honorable mentions. It allows you to give mana to units that you buy in the shop, but also via Mushroom. And this was a request that I put into the developers not long after Unicorn Pack came out, that I felt like it really should be easier to gain mana in the shop. And the fact that this unit only has 2 triggers, but also gives Spooked, really makes you think about how you use this in the shop. And so it's not quite as brainless as something like Turkey or Jersey Devil, which can just buff an unlimited number of units in both shop and battle. That's not to say Amalgamation isn't strong, and that's another reason why it's in here, because it can help you win with teams that would otherwise have very little chance. Number 3 is Pteranodon. It's been in many a video in the history of this channel, and it's had 2 very powerful abilities. I think when it was originally reworked, no one thought that the new ability was very good, but it is extremely strong. And I think the most useful thing for me in customs is being able to duplicate level 3 units. I don't use it all that often, but it is incredibly useful, especially if it's a unit where it's very unrealistic that you're going to get 2 level 3s. And if you want to avoid using Tiger, like I often do, then Pteranodon is the obvious choice. Probably it makes number 3 in this list based on Golden Pack though, because it's very satisfying making a Pteranodon team work within Golden. And I'll link in the description a recent Pteranodon video that I was incredibly proud of, because it took a bunch of attempts to get a usable run. Number 2 is the Badger, so probably the only unit from Turtle Pack that's on screen right now. I'm just double checking them all. Yeah, we do have a couple from Pack 2, but Turtle Pack Badger for me is the king, and always has been. Honestly, it probably would have been number 1 in most annoying unit way back at the very beginning because of the way that Honey Badger worked. But then that was adjusted, so it wasn't quite as frustrating to play against. In fact, I think you probably see more teams with Badger at the front than you do Badger at the back in the current version of the game. Badger is actually a very uncommon unit in custom packs. I'm not really sure why. It allows you to do some incredibly fun stuff, not least when paired with some of the other units on this screen. And in fact, I've got a video coming up soon that will involve a couple of pets, but I'm not going to spoil exactly how that build works. You'll just have to wait and see. So that just leaves the number 1 spot to reveal. I don't think anyone's going to have much doubt about which pet is going to be number 1. I think it was number 1 last time, and it is the Mole. Now, Mole used to have an incredibly dull ability. It would just give +1/1 to the adjacent pets when bought, which I could absolutely understand why they did that. It was just another way to add a simple pet to custom packs. But over time, I think that ability became fairly pointless. And the rework that they came up with for the Puppy Pack revamp was just incredible. And such a creative design. I really didn't understand it when I first saw it. But that just makes it more satisfying when you manage to build fun combos out of this unit. And there are so many of them. The number is just staggering. And I recently did one with Mole plus Tardigrade, which is definitely one of my favourite builds I've ever uploaded. I'll link that in the description as well if you haven't seen it. But yeah, there's just a laundry list of incredible Mole teams. But I think probably in the last 2 years, 5 or 6 of my favourite videos I've made have all involved Mole. It's just that good a unit design. So we've finally reached the end of all the fluffy lists. Now we're going to look at the real top 10. And much like Rev did in his video, I'm going to go over some of the rules and restrictions I was using when I was making this list. So number 1 is that I'm only considering custom packs standard arena. Now I do play the standard packs pretty often, but the vast majority of my playtime these days is in custom packs, especially since they added standard mode, which I'd been requesting for a very long time. I think the value of certain pets changes quite drastically in wild mode, but since I don't play it, I'm not going to consider it. Secondly, I must take at least 1 pet from every tier. I think a lot of people would probably ignore tier 1 whenever they're doing this kind of a list, But some of the tier 1 pets are extremely strong, but since they're available on the earliest turn possible, their impact on the game can be massive. Thirdly, I'm going to try and avoid repeating archetypes as much as possible. So we don't just want an entire top 10 flooded with snipers or flooded with summon units. I'm going to try and work as much variety in as possible. And then lastly, and this is the real kicker, 10 pets is nowhere near enough. So yes, there are definitely more than 10 pets on the screen here, even if we discount all the honourable mentions at the bottom. In the end, I had so many pets that I couldn't narrow it down to 10, and honestly I don't think it makes a lot of sense to either, because you just can't represent all the different types of units well enough. And there are also a lot of units that are very similar, and so what I've done is I've tried to pair them up. In one case we have a triplet as well, and then even the honourable mentions are kind of paired together. Not in all cases, there were a few odd ones out. But I think this set of pets covers most of the best pets for standard customs. There's probably another 20 to 30 pets that would be realistic candidates for this top 10, but there just isn't enough space on screen, and we also don't want this video going to 2 hours long. Much like the other lists, don't worry too much about the order here. The only thing going into this list was I was very sure about my number 1, but most of these the order doesn't really matter too much. So starting at number 10, we have got the pairing of Oyster and Pillbug. So these are two of the ultimate premium buy-sell units in the game. Oyster will be the most bought tier 6 for almost anyone who has Golden Pack. It's an auto buy as long as you have a slot available. Getting that 1 extra gold from a buy-sell might not seem like a lot, but technically Oyster by itself is an infinite, because you could buy an Oyster, sell it, gain 1 gold, roll once, find another Oyster, and just keep doing that indefinitely. Now that in and of itself wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but there are tons of buy-sell units in the game that can get out of control, and Oyster is one of the main reasons for that. Most of those units are actually at the bottom of the screen. We've got Bird of Paradise, we've got Sea Anemone, we also have Stoked, which can sell into an Oyster from turn 11 onwards. I wouldn't necessarily say that Oyster is an auto-take, because there are some packs where you don't want it spawning from something like an Eagle, but I really did want to represent buy-sell in the top 10, and I felt like Oyster made the most sense for that. Something that doesn't make a lot of sense is Pillbug at tier 1. Now this unit used to just give stats at the end of every second turn, but it was changed to stock a free pill on sell. And that was a change that I was dead set against because it is ludicrously broken for a tier 1. But recently it actually got buffed, so it was a 2-2 stat line after the change, but then it got pushed up to a 2-3. So there is never any reason to leave Pillbug out of your custom pack. It has the premium stat line, it has probably the best tier 1 ability in the game. I actually don't think I have any other tier 1s on the screen here, even though a lot of them are very strong. But Pillbug definitely takes the cake, because it is super relevant even in the very late turns, especially when you're trying to do funny stuff with Pteranodon. And it seems like not too long ago yet another infinite was discovered, and I'm sure Pillbug will be involved in it somehow. Number 9, we move on to the tier 3s. We've got Weasel plus Hatching Chick. Now, Weasel might be a controversial pick here, but really it's just here to represent the gold generators, because I've felt for quite a long time that most of the gold generating units are overtuned, at least in customs, and that's partly because you can combo them together so you can just keep on generating an inordinate amount of gold. You could also probably group in a bunch of the roll pets, so things like Bigfoot and Hamster and so on. Being able to spend more gold than the average team is always going to give you a huge advantage, and Weasel is one of the best ways to get that going in customs. You have access to Opossum, which you can sell onto the Weasel because it's a feint pet, and it actually has a very good starting stat line as well, considering how strong its ability is. Because it generates gold in battle, you can also use Chocolate Cake, you can use Gingerbread, it can spawn from a spider and give you gold that way. In the late game you can put Mushroom on it and then you'll double the amount of gold that you get. I think Weasel must have one of the highest win rates of any tier 3, because similar to the buy-sell units, extra gold basically increases your odds of high rolling. And because all of these effects multiply, oftentimes these gold builds can just get out of control. Down at the bottom of the screen we've also got Sauropod, which is another premium gold pet that can create out of control combos pretty easily, but given that it's a tier 6, it's just not as readily available as Weasel on tier 3. And talking about runaway chain reactions, we've also got the Hatching Chick. Now, Hatching Chick level 3 is something that I've argued against for quite a while. It used to be on start of turn, so you'd have to wait 1 turn after getting your level 3 Hatching Chick before you would start getting the extra experience. And then it was changed to be end turn. which sounds like a subtle change, but it's actually pretty drastic. It's a massive tempo boost being able to level up a unit one turn earlier. The pets you get on in-turn level up are automatically frozen now, so you're not missing out on anything. And of course there are tons of level up and experienced pets that can tie into the Hatching Chick's ability and further accelerate the process of getting your entire team to level 3. In fact, in custom packs, even in standard mode, it is extremely common to face multiple level 3 Hatching Chick teams in the late game. In fact, I've had some runs recently where the last 3 opponents were all level 3 Hatching Chick squads. Absolutely bonkers unit at tier 3, and the level 1 and 2 abilities aren't half bad either. Moving on to number 8, we've got the pairing of Whale and Pelican. Now I've already talked about Pelican in this video, extremely versatile unit, very fun to use, and the addition of churros to custom packs allows units like Pelican and Whale to go before opposing units that have higher attack, as long as they don't also have churros. And that prevents one of the biggest downsides of both of these units, which is having your order disrupted, or the pet that you were intending to swallow being either sniped or having its strawberry removed in the case of Pelican. Now Whale has just had its ability reworked, but I do feel like it is still extremely strong even in the early days. Again, it's very similar to Pelican in that it's extremely versatile, allowing you to duplicate abilities from turn 5 onwards. It doesn't matter if it's the old Whale or the new Whale, if you get Whale plus Deer, you're still getting 2 buses. All around, extremely strong unit with tons of great synergies. And it's hard to begrudge either of these pets being strong when they're so fun to play. Number 7, we have the tier 2 summoning duo of Stork and Spider. These two units are both outrageously strong in customs. Stork maybe takes a bit longer to get off the ground because when you first buy it, it's going to be summoning tier 1s. However, these days you have a wider range of tier 1 pets that are beneficial to spawn. You've got the classic cricket, but then we also have cockroach. There's farmer mouse now. I'm sure there are some other ones that I'm forgetting. But then in the late game, Stork becomes absolutely outrageous, where it's spawning a level 3 tier 5. And of course you can put Mushroom on it to get multiple tier 5s from the same unit. Of course you can pill Stork in the shop as well, so you can gain access to high level tier 5s. And of course we now also have access to Confetti, which allows you to convert a tier 5 into a tier 6. It wasn't that long ago when Stork used to spawn pets with triple base stats at level 3, but even with the massively toned down size of the summons, it's still an absolute powerhouse. Spider doesn't have quite as much late game relevance, but it is unbelievably good in the early to mid game. The strength of both of these units basically comes down to the fact that you can pick what the units are going to spawn. And even though there are restrictions on how many pets you can have from each archetype in standard mode, there are so many good tier 3s spread across the different archetypes that you can have an extremely strong spread of summons from a Spider. Number 6, we have Hydra and Leopard. Now I could have put a bunch of other different units in here. We've got lots of tier 6s whose abilities now depend on their attack stats. So we've also got Sleipnir and Warthog, Lionfish, German Shepherd. I guess you could make a case for most of them. Because again, Confetti has a massive role to play in the strength of these units. Previously it used to be much more difficult to get these units and then scale them up. Your best bet was Emperor Tamarin, which was toned down massively, specifically to avoid that outcome. However, nowadays you can scale basically anything you want, and then buy a couple of Confettis at the end of the game, and transform your tier 4, 5 or 6 scalers into premium tier 6 units that are going to convert that 50 attack stat line into massive value. Number 5, we have the premium summon support units. We've got Spinosaurus here and Jersey Devil. Of course, there's also Turkey at the bottom, and I didn't mention Eagle when I was talking about Stork and Spider. It's pretty much in the same boat. Spinosaurus is an extremely powerful summon support unit. It has a lot of the same benefits as Turkey, but it works on feint instead of on summon, and so it actually has much greater utility in that you can use it with many more units and varied team compositions. It also allows you to combo with other pets that generate feints in the shop. We're going to get around to talking about one of them pretty soon. Spinosaurus narrowly avoided getting nerfed in one of the recent test servers, probably due to the overall weakness of Starpack at the time, but nerfing it would definitely be justified. A unit that was nerfed is the Jersey Devil. Originally, the Jersey Devil had no limit. If you sold enough level 3 units throughout the game, and there were many ways to do this, you could actually have a single Jersey Devil buffing every summon on your team to 50-50 stats. Thankfully that was patched, but I don't think the change really went far enough. In fact, actually in the second round of changes, Jersey Devil was moved from tier 5 to tier 6. but even then it still feels unbelievably strong. Strangely, in standard customs, Jersey Devil is actually very rare. I have a funny feeling that most of the people who are playing Jersey Devil all the time have just stayed playing wild mode so that they can have an entire pack of summoning units. But even in standard mode, it is trivial to set up Jersey Devil, pilling Anteater, selling level 3 Stoat, level 3 Platypus. There's so many ways to get all 5 cells well in advance of turn 9 when you can gain access to the Jersey Devil in the first place. Jersey Devil also kind of falls into the same category as many of these units at the bottom of the screen, in that they have inherent setup costs, and so they're not quite as reliable. Things like Starfish, Ostrich, Sea Anemone, even Bird of Paradise, I guess. But a lot of that can be very easily mitigated in custom packs, and the top end power level relative to the setup is just way too strong across the board on most of these units. Number 4, we've got the ailment pets. We've got Manticore, which I've already mentioned, and Flea. Now I think Flea is probably the best of the early game ailment pets. I think there's a pretty strong case to be made that Flea is much better than some of the late game ailment pets like Red Dragon. Again, like Weasel, it's a faint pet, so it can receive buffs from Opossum. You can use Mushroom on it, it works with Anubis. It does have Frostwolf for competition these days, which will work with a level 1 Anubis, whereas Flea needs level 2. However, weakness is just much better than Cold, because it doesn't disappear after the first hit, which opens the door for a lot of very powerful teams that involve multiple low damage hits. Things that involve Hedgehog, Blowfish, Small One, Woodpecker. Actually, we've got Woodpecker at the bottom of the screen for good reason. The fact that the ailments from Flea are guaranteed to land on the highest health units is also extremely clutch. And Manticore, I did mention it earlier in the underrated list. Looking at this now with Manticore number 4, I do wonder if maybe I've underrated it still. I felt like this unit was totally broken when I first saw it, and my mind really hasn't been changed. Manticore stacks, so if you have multiple Manticores, then the amount of damage that the ailments do increases with each level of the Manticores. Very similar to Cat at the bottom of the screen. You can have multiple cats and then, you buy a pair and it's worth plus 6/6 or plus 8/8. The same thing applies with Manticore. But to be honest, you don't actually even need to stack Manticore. A single Manticore can be enough to power up your ailment team to ridiculous levels. And honestly, I probably haven't played Manticore enough. And I think in the last year there have been quite a few times where I've needed Manticore to bail me out when I've been trying to get a difficult build to work. Of course, it is a big beneficiary of the fact that the meta in customs is mostly scaling. I think if there was an abundance of summon teams, it might not be quite so strong. But as tier 6s go, I would still put it among the absolute cream of the crop. There are a few tier 6s above it on my list here though. Number 3, we've got Real Velociraptor and Monty. I think Monty is a sleeper pick for one of the best pets in the game. Its inbuilt ability of doubling damage, which then increases to tripling and quadrupling damage at levels 2 and 3, is outrageously powerful for a token pet. Easter Egg was moved up to tier 5, so it's a little bit more difficult to get access to Monty these days. But there are so many ways to make his ability count multiple times in a battle, and I'm pairing him with Real Velociraptor here because the ability to restore protective perks makes units like Monty that much more powerful. I think Rev's top 10 had Panther in it, and you could probably put Panther in a similar category to Monty. Very easily capable of soloing large parts of the opposing team. I actually think both of these units are very underplayed in customs considering how strong they are. I can understand someone not wanting to go through the trouble of getting Monty from the Easter egg, but Monty is still considered a tier 1, so you can actually very easily transfer your stats from a tier 1 or 2 that you've scaled up using a single frog buy cell. Of course, there are also plenty of other pets that pair really well with Real Velociraptor like Reindeer, Ox, Brain Cramp, Coconut Crab, Gorilla, even just Turtle. Perk gaining teams are running riot in customs already, and I'm actually surprised how few of them have Real Velociraptor on board. And now at number 2 we reach the triplet of vertical scaling pets. We have the classic Monkey, we have the Praying Mantis, and the Behemoth. And I've already talked about Behemoth in depth in one of the other sections. I don't remember if I mentioned at the time that Competo is a massive problem in customs. It's utterly broken beyond belief. And although these 3 units aren't the only way to get massive stats onto a single unit quickly, they're some of the best. And in the olden days when a vertical scaling unit reached 50-50, that was it. Its value had peaked. But now with Confetto, you can transform those units into even more powerful ones. To be honest, there's probably a lot of people who don't like transforming Behemoth because they want to keep scaling beyond 50-50. But a lot of the time a 50 attack unit is going to be more than enough. If it's something from the Leopard/Hydra section, and I'm grouping Monkey and Mantis in here as well because all of these units kind of compound each other. Monkey can stack additional buffs onto Behemoth and accelerate the scaling to even more unreasonable proportions. And of course, Mantis allows you to convert any banana into another monkey. And so it is extremely common to see teams that are farming multiple level 2 or 3 monkeys very quickly, maxing out a Mantis, and then competoing the Mantis into a tier 6. Or sometimes using Ammonite to turn it into a Mimic Octopus. Of course, we've also got the Mantis Feint build with Spinosaurus, Secretary Bird, or Shark. There are loads of premium Feint pets that you can take in customs, even in standard mode. We've got Quetzalcoatlus, which is the new mini mammoth on tier 3. We've got Betta Fish, Blobfish, Turtle. All of these units you can put a banana on it and then immediately get another level for your monkey. Mantis was on the cusp of being nerfed in one of the previous test servers because its win rate was so outrageous, but it ended up dodging the changes. Again, probably similar to some of the other Star Pack units on this list, because Star Pack was struggling a bit in versus mode. So I'll just quickly talk about some of the honourable mentions here. There's loads of pets here that are ultra strong, and you could definitely make a case for any of them being in the actual top 10, or top 21 as I have here. Axolotl is out of control these days in customs. Bird of Paradise Sauropod is an extremely obnoxious combo, and of course you can run Bird of Paradise with Hamster or any of these other very reliable gold generators. Nyala, one of the premium trumpet pets, works really well with Whale, and you can put a mushroom on it for the easiest 50-50 doggo of your life. Shop scaling is still busted, Lioness and Chicken, both outrageous. Lioness stacking is one of the most common things I see in standard customs, especially if you end up inadvertently drawing a few extra turns early. Hitting the 50-50 shop is still pretty trivial. I did mention Woodpecker already. There are some outrageously broken combos with Woodpecker, which are thankfully actually pretty rare. There was a time when Woodpecker was all you would see in customs, but these days it's thankfully pretty uncommon. Skunk, of course, represents the health reduction. I'm not actually sure, do I have any health reduction units in the top 20 odd here? I don't think so. But of course there's Skunk, Kraken, Black Bear, Cali Greyhound. There's loads of them. But I do put them a bit lower on the list here because I think the ability to gain stats on your entire team in customs is so easy that units like Skunk, their value I think falls significantly. Especially since many of the units like Leopard and Hydra don't actually care about having their health reduced as long as they still have their 50 attack. We have Chimera hiding here behind Anteater, I think a unit that is massively underplayed, and whose power level has shot through the roof now that they've added tons of new mana generating units. Of course we have the old classic Cat plus Cow. Both of them could easily be in the top 10 here. Cow is actually so strong it doesn't even need Cat a lot of the time. And then again I talked about the buy-sell units. We've got Starfish and Sea Anemone here. They fall into that category of units that create these chain reactions that produce teams that are initially weak but then massively outstrip the competition in a short space of time. So that takes us to the number 1 pick. We've got tons of pets on screen, but there are a couple of notable omissions. What do you think it's going to be? Make your guesses now. It's time to reveal that my number 1 picks are Parrot and Tiger. Now if you did your homework and watched RevGT's video at the beginning, you will already know that he took Parrot as his number 1 pick, and I think he had Tiger as 3rd or 4th as well. But he did mention that he considered Tiger for a possible number 1 instead. These two Turtle Pack stalwarts have been busted for a very long time, but it's difficult to see them ever being changed. The last time Tiger was changed, it actually got a stat increase, which was pretty amusing to me, because as one of the top 2 units in the game, you would always take Tiger in your custom pack, even if it was a 1-1. The same could probably be said for Parrot as well. So what is it that makes these units so powerful? Well, there's lots of factors and they're slightly different for each. Tiger, as Rev put it, is extremely high value for very low effort. I think that's the second time I've incorrectly paraphrased him in this episode. But yes, the value you can get from a Tiger can just get out of control very easily because it doesn't have any limit on how many times it can activate. That means you can do some very strong but simple combos, like you can put Tiger behind a Leopard. That can be worth a single 25 damage snipe even at level 1. But then there are other ways that you can start multiplying the effectiveness of Tiger. You can put Tiger behind a unit that has Mushroom, and therefore you will get 2 Tiger activations on the same unit. You can put Tiger behind units that feint themselves at start of battle, like Swordfish or Panda, and then the Tiger will just move up behind the unit that has suddenly received all these buffs. You can have Tiger move behind another unit using Onion or one of the other move pets. The only thing that you can't really do with Tiger is put Tiger behind another Tiger. That doesn't work, but you can put Tiger behind a Parrot. And so when the 2 best pets in the game are able to combo together, that's a pretty big checkmark in the plus column. So moving on to Parrot, the main difference between Tiger and Parrot is that Parrot needs its own stats. So a Parrot copying a Leopard isn't going to do 25 damage snipes unless the Parrot already has 50 attack. However, Parrot is available 2 tiers earlier, which makes it trivial to get it scaled up in anticipation of finding your tier 6 units later. And since its ability works out of the box on any tier, you can have Parrot copying your premium tier 3s or 4s or 5s until you find the endgame unit that you're going to settle on. Not too long ago I was recording a video with Sleipnir and I was kind of struggling, and then I added Parrot to the pack and it just became so easy. It didn't matter if my team had a base stat Sleipnir, as long as the Parrot was massive and it was copying the Sleipnir. It was essentially like having a pre-scaled tier 6 on my team already. This is part of the reason that Oyster Mushroom is so strong in customs, but Parrot has the benefit of being able to copy a top tier ability, while also retaining all of its equipment, and it can be moved behind different pets on different turns, as and when you need it to. Both of these units also make it much easier to achieve what would be considered a high roll team, because you no longer need to find the same pets in the shop. If you have a team that needs 2 level 3 skunks, or 2 level 3 eagles, you can put a Parrot or a Tiger behind them instead. And now, instead of only looking for Chocolate and the pet you want duplicates of, you essentially have a wild card to look for as well. And that gives you a much better chance of fully leveling both of the units. It should also be mentioned that while Tiger cannot make a Tiger repeat, Parrot can be placed behind another Parrot as long as the front one has higher attack. When you look at the wealth of powerful units that are available on this screen, it's not hard to see why units that could copy those abilities or repeat those abilities would be at the absolute apex of the SAP ecosystem. Alright, that was an awful lot of talking. We've made it to the end though. Hopefully you've enjoyed this trip through a tiny fraction of the pets that are actually in the game. I think I mentioned earlier that I wasn't considering any of the brand new pets for these lists, except the ones based on artwork. Some of the brand new pets are definitely ultra powerful, but I think we'll wait until they've all had at least one round of balance changes before inducting them into the Hall of Fame. Let me know in the comments what your picks would be for any of these lists. Everyone plays this game in a different way, and so it's only natural that people have differing opinions on how strong each of the various pets are. I think that's probably one of the things that makes the game fun in the first place.